When I was just starting out in Valorant, I remember my opponents would tell me to hit aim labs whenever I whiffed terribly. As much as that was said as an insult, I think a lot of players find truth in that. If you're whiffing shots, you should practice your aim more. But during my climb to Radiant, I realized aim training and spamming deathmatches can only get you so far because there are 6 subtle reasons that cause us to whiff our shots. Hey guys, it's Konpeki here, and today I'll break down what those 6 subtle reasons are and how to fix them. You can identify which reasons might be holding you back the most. Also, if you're tired of whiffing your shots and being hard stuck, my team of Radiant coaches and I can give you personalized feedback to help you climb 500 RR guaranteed or your money back inside our premium 10-week coaching program called the Immortal roadmap program. Inside, you'll be getting live lessons, scrims, drills, and one-on-ones from 1K RR Radiant coaches and world-class championship level coaches such as Comet, who's a current coach on Vitality that just played in Champs, and Milan, who was a coach on Ascend when they won Champs in 2021. We just opened up signups for the 21st season cohort, so if you're serious about ranking up, book a free call with me or one of my coaches using the link in the description below to see if we'd be a good fit. Now back to the video. For our first subtle reason, let's dive into a familiar situation. You're playing defense and hear a group of enemies rushing your lane. Fortunately, you're prepared and have a plan. As soon as they get close, they'll be met with your well-placed pop flash. So you flash and swing, successfully blinding the whole team. But then panic sets in, and somehow you end up with 0 kills and your own demise. While it's possible to achieve a positive outcome in such a scenario, this brings me to my main point. Having multiple targets on your screen is a recipe for disaster. Your goal in Valorant is to focus on taking one-on-one gunfights, especially ones where you have an advantage with better positioning or utility. When you have one enemy on your screen, there's only one thing to focus on, shooting the head in front of you. However, when there's more than one target, the situation changes entirely. The mental load of the gunfight increases as you have to decide which target to shoot first. These decisions are complicated, especially when you need to ignore the target that's less likely to kill you and focusing on the one aiming at you. You have to make these decisions within milliseconds since time is often against you. After all, you must be faster than both opposing players to even secure one kill. Of course, you can improve in these scenarios with experience, and you'll inevitably find yourself in such situations as rounds progress and get messier. However, try to avoid them as best you can. The key is to focus on your positioning to isolate these fights in your favor, and not being overzealous by peeking out too wide. Personally for me, I tend to overpeak angles when I hear a bunch of enemies pushing up on me and I get overly excited. But whenever I play in positions where that can happen to me, I always tell myself that I'm just gonna go for one kill and back off to play numbers with my team. On the topic of how our mental can cause us to make mistakes, let's discuss another subtle reason why you might be missing crucial shots. Have you ever considered your mental state before playing Valorant? Let's be honest, ranked can be frustrating, and actually, most of the time it is. If you're already having a bad day, a game of Valorant is likely to make it worse, and your performance will suffer too. First and foremost, when you're frustrated, you're more likely to make irrational decisions. Whether it's playing too aggressively or positioning poorly due to restlessness, you're bound to put yourself in gunfights where you can't utilize your mechanical skill effectively. But more importantly, being in a negative state while playing is certainly going to affect your shots. For most of us, being in an agitated state of mind is going to make you impatiently rush your shots, and it can even cause your hands to tense up so your aim becomes shaky. This would be the complete opposite of having calm aim that allows you to be methodical and patient with your aim that allows you to take advantage of your rifle's first bullet accuracy. In an ideal scenario, you wouldn't want to queue up for ranked if you're having a bad day. But if you do end up queuing up and you feel yourself tensing up your mouse from stress during a game, take a deep breath and picture yourself trying to gently hold an egg with your hand. After a quick mental reset, try to continue to focus on what you can still be doing in game to have an impact. Moving on to reason number 3. Almost everyone is familiar with the basics of crosshair placement in Valorant. The game offers plenty of visual cues for where head height usually is, so lining up a shot isn't typically a challenge. But what happens when we add elevation into the mix? Things start to get a little bit more complicated. When you introduce the y-axis, opponents can occupy a wider range of positions, making it harder to slice the pie effectively since there are no longer clear guidelines on where to aim. And I've been there myself, holding an angle from heaven, only to lose the gunfight in a way that feels frustrating. It's uncomfortable, and the margin for error grows as you struggle to microadjust your aim to hit the head. This is especially true when your opponent has the advantage of pre-aiming a more predictable angle. My advice for this is to avoid positioning yourself for these tricky gunfights whenever possible. Of course, there will be times when you have no choice but to engage from a tough spot like heaven. If that's the case, you can try to use more utility to isolate those gunfights and focus on pre-aiming the most common angles. But during the round, if you have the option, make things easier for yourself by choosing positions where your crosshair placement is more straightforward. And speaking of making things easier, don't we all just love getting bombarded by utility and having no chance to actually play the game? Yeah, me too. But But this brings us to the fourth reason why you might be missing your shots. Utility plays a crucial role in Valorant, and when you're contesting a space, you can bet that something will be thrown your way. Before a round starts, it's important to assess the enemy team's composition and anticipate the utility you're likely to face while defending a certain area. By mentally simulating the round and planning your escape routes, you'll be better prepared to focus on your aim. This way, you can anticipate the incoming utility rather than scrambling to react and finding solutions on the fly. However, even with this preparation, sometimes it can all just be too much. We've all been there before, mentally overloaded from shooting down a Sova dart, trying to dodge an Omen flash, running to avoid a molly, all while trying to get that one frag. If this sounds familiar, it might be a sign that you're overly focused on the enemy's utility, and your positioning could be the culprit that's putting you in unfavorable gunfights. If you find yourself in this kind of situation, it's the perfect opportunity to find gaps in the map that the opposition struggles to clear with their utility, or to simply play a safer angle. A great example of this is the hell position on Ascent's A site. Instead of getting overwhelmed by utility during a full execute, this spot allows you to focus on easier, isolated gunfights due to the difficulty of flushing you out. Another option to use is teamwork. Having someone dedicated to breaking utility can reduce that mental overload during the round. Keep this in mind the next time you feel overwhelmed by too many abilities. Another subtle reason you might be missing your shots is movement. When people mention movement as a factor in whiffing, the first thing that probably comes to mind is movement inaccuracy, how your shots miss when your character is moving. While that's a crucial component of weapon accuracy, there's another aspect of movement that's just as important. Mastering control over your movement directly translates to mastering control over your aim. This is because when you move your agent, your crosshair will also follow your movement. While the crosshair's movement is generally predictable, unexpected situations can arise, requiring you to react and make adjustments that aren't typically desired, and this in turn causes you to whiff. For example, you might have heard that the best way to peek an enemy is using the T rule, which is when you peek perpendicularly to the enemy's line of sight to maximize your movement speed on their screen. However, if you try to swing wide to peek an enemy and you accidentally brush up against the wall, your movement speed will drop even if you're heading in the right direction, which ends up making you an easier target to hit. It might also throw off your aim if you're not prepared for it. So to avoid these issues, stay aware of your surroundings and give yourself enough space when peeking. This way, you can focus on the fight without worrying about external distractions. The same thing can be said about other in-game mechanics that can affect your character's movement, such as tagging from bullets and agent abilities like grav nets, sage slows, ray satchels, stim beacons, and so on. So make sure you're aware of the variables that can affect your movement in your games so you can adapt your aim accordingly. Now, as if dealing with enemies wasn't hard enough, sometimes you're just going to whiff. For a final reason why you might whiff, it's something you might not want to hear. Sometimes you're just going to miss your shots, and it's not always your fault. However, there's an important lesson to learn from this. Our mechanical skill is limited by the fact that we're human, specifically by our reaction times. The average human reaction time is around 210 milliseconds, and naturally, you won't always be reacting at your fastest in the middle of a match. Sometimes the enemy is just a bit quicker, and factors like ping and peeker's advantage can also come into play. And in some extreme cases, you might simply get unlucky. Every so often, you'll find yourself frustrated after lining up the perfect shot only to be taken down first. And when you review the replay to figure out why you missed, you might notice that the enemy moved just milliseconds after you clicked. It's impossible to predict exactly how your opponent will move, and even if you do react, you might not have enough time to adjust your shot. And let's not forget about bullet spread during first shot accuracy. If you've ever missed a shot on someone AFK in spawn, you've likely experienced this. Unless you're using a scoped in sniper or guardian, your first bullet isn't guaranteed to be 100% accurate, which can contribute to some of those subtle whiffs. The most important takeaway when you find yourself in situations like these is to move on to the next round and don't waste your energy getting upset or tilted. Just focus on the next round and keep going.